She cheated on me last night. I know because I saw the message on her phone. For 5 years, I believed I had a good marriage with Julia. We had built a home together, shared inside jokes, made plans for the future. I wasn't just in love with her, I trusted her. Completely. That trust shattered in an instant. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't searching for proof of infidelity because, until that moment, I didn't believe there was anything to find. But when her phone lit up on the nightstand while she was in the shower, the words on the screen sliced through me like a blade. Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again. An unknown number. No name attached. I felt the world tilt under me. My mind immediately searched for excuses. Maybe it was a joke, a misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The sound of water stopped. Julia would be out any second. My hands trembled as I placed her phone exactly as I'd found it. I needed time to think. Time to understand how the woman I loved had become a stranger. That night, when she told me she was going to visit her sister, I followed her. She didn't go to her sister's place. She went to a cheap motel across town. And when she knocked on the door of room 214, a man I had never seen before opened it. He smiled. She smiled back. And then, without hesitation, she stepped inside. The door shut behind them. I stood there in the dark parking lot, frozen. The cold air burned my lungs, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. 5 years of my life. Gone in a single night. I could have stormed in. I could have screamed, demanded answers, made a scene. But something inside me held back. No, I wasn't going to lose control. Not yet. If Julia wanted to play games, she had no idea what was coming next. I drove home in silence. The streetlights cast long shadows across the road, but all I saw was her, the way she smiled at him, the ease with which she disappeared into that motel room. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken lapse in judgment. It was routine. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my hands had stopped shaking. My heartbeat had slowed. The initial shock had settled into something colder, sharper, a quiet, calculated rage. She came home 2 hours later. I was sitting in the kitchen when I heard the front door unlock. Footsteps. The soft rustling of her coat being removed. When she walked in, she looked the same as she always did, her dark hair slightly tousled, her perfume lingering in the air. She smiled at me. Smiled. "Hey, babe," she said, pressing a kiss to my cheek like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just spent the night in another man's bed. "You're up late." I forced myself to return her smile. I played my part. "Yeah, couldn't sleep," I said. "How's your sister?" Her lie came so easily, so smoothly, that I might have believed it if I didn't already know the truth. "She's fine," Julia replied, setting her purse down. "We just had some wine and caught up. You know how she is, never runs out of things to talk about." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. She was good at this. Too good. I watched her move through the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water like it was just another normal night. And maybe for her, it was. Maybe I was just another idiot husband who would never suspect a thing. But she had made one mistake. She didn't realize I knew. And now, I was going to make sure she never saw it coming. I didn't sleep that night. Julia curled up beside me, her breathing soft and steady, as if she hadn't just spent the evening betraying me. How many times had she done this? How long had I been sleeping next to a woman who was living a double life? By morning, my anger had crystallized into something more dangerous: focus. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I needed proof. Undeniable proof. So I started with her phone. Julia had never been secretive with it before. She would leave it on the counter, on the nightstand, even in the bathroom while she showered. But after last night, I paid attention. Really paid attention. She never left it unattended anymore. If she wasn't using it, it was face down. She turned away slightly when she texted, just enough to make sure I couldn't see. She knew she was being watched. That meant I had to be careful. I installed a keylogger on her laptop. It was simple, just a small piece of software that recorded every keystroke, every message she typed, every email she sent. Then, I hired a private investigator. It felt dramatic, like something out of a movie, but I wasn't going to make a move until I had everything I needed. If she wanted to lie to my face, I wanted to see exactly how deep the betrayal went. 3 days later, I had my answer. The investigator sent me photos. Dozens of them. Julia. The same cheap motel. The same man. In one, they were standing in the parking lot, laughing. He had his hand on her waist, pulling her close. In another, they were inside a dimly lit restaurant, sitting in a corner booth, her hand resting on his. But it was the last photo that nearly broke me. A picture of them kissing in his car. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers gripping the edges of the paper so tightly that it crumpled. There it was. Undeniable proof. The time for patience was over. It was time for Julia to find out exactly who she was dealing with. I could have walked away. I could have gone straight to a lawyer, handed over the evidence, and let the legal system carve her out of my life like a tumor. But that wasn't enough. She needed to feel this. She needed to know what it was like to be blindsided. So, I did something unexpected. I contacted him. His name was Ryan. I found his number in Julia's messages, tucked between flirty texts and half-naked photos of my wife. I didn't call right away. First, I watched. I studied. Ryan wasn't some faceless stranger anymore. He had a life, a job, a fiancée. Her name was Natalie. She looked like the kind of woman who had built her entire world around this man, just like I had built mine around Julia. I arranged a meeting. A casual text from Julia's phone, sent while she was in the shower. Meet me at the coffee shop on 8th. Need to see you. And just like that, he took the bait. An hour later, he walked into the cafe right on time. I had chosen a table in the back, far from curious eyes. When he saw me sitting there instead of Julia, his steps faltered. Ryan, I said, my voice calm. Have a seat. His brow furrowed. Who the hell are you? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's a funny question, considering you've been sleeping with my wife. The color drained from his face. He sat down hard, his mouth opening, then closing, like he was struggling to process what I had just said. Look, Ayo, you didn't know she was married, did you? I interrupted. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. She told me she was single. I nodded slowly, leaning back in my chair. Of course she did. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't the only fool at the table. Ryan exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. He looked shaken, but I didn't care. He wasn't the victim here. Natalie was. And she was about to find out the truth, too. Julia thought she had everything under control. She had no idea that Ryan knew. That I knew. That the walls were already closing in. Her birthday was in 2 days. She had been planning a fancy dinner for weeks, booking a private dining room, inviting all our friends and family. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night about her. But now, it was my night. Because this was where everything unraveled. The setup. Ryan and I weren't friends, but we had a shared goal now, the truth. I told him everything. About the private investigator. About the texts, the motel, the deception. About how Julia had been lying to both of us. And then, I told him my plan. He hesitated at first. But when I showed him a photo of Julia kissing him in his car, the same photo I had received just days ago, his hesitation vanished. This isn't just about us, I said, watching the anger build behind his eyes. She's lying to Natalie, too. His jaw clenched. I'll handle Natalie, he said. But I want to be there when you take her down. I smirked. Oh, don't worry. You'll have a front row seat. The birthday dinner. The restaurant was beautiful, warm lights, expensive table settings, glasses of champagne sparkling under the chandelier. Julia was glowing, basking in the attention of our friends and family. I watched her from across the room, my fingers wrapped around a whiskey glass. She had no idea what was coming. Halfway through dinner, I stood up and clinked my glass. Everyone, I said, my voice calm, steady. I'd like to say a few words about my wife. Julia's eyes lit up. She loved attention. She thought I was about to shower her with affection in front of a room full of people. She had no idea. I want to celebrate Julia for being a loving wife, I continued, my voice dripping with quiet amusement. For her commitment to our marriage. For her honesty. I paused, letting my words sink in. Then I pulled out the stack of photos and placed them on the table. Gasps rippled through the room. Julia's face drained of color. What is this? She stammered, her eyes darting across the table. I tilted my head. Oh, you don't recognize these? Maybe Ryan can help jog your memory. And just like that, Ryan stood up. All eyes turned to him. Natalie, his fiancée, was staring at him in shock. She had no idea why he was here until now. Ryan looked Julia dead in the eye. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Crushing. Then came the whispers. The gasps. The realization spreading like wildfire through the room. Julia opened her mouth, but no words came out. I placed the divorce papers in front of her. Sign them, I said quietly, or I'll make sure this gets uglier. Tears welled in her eyes. But I felt nothing. No pity. No remorse. She had done this. She had destroyed us. And now, she was watching it all burn. The weight of the room was suffocating. Everyone was staring at her. Julia sat frozen, her hands trembling over the divorce papers. The lively chatter, the clinking glasses, the warmth of the evening, all of it had been drowned in the wreckage of her lies. Natalie was the first to break. "You bastard," she whispered, her voice shaking as she turned to Ryan. "You cheated on me?" Ryan exhaled, looking at her with genuine regret. "I didn't know, Nat. She told me she was single." Natalie let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, that's rich. And you just believed her?" Across the table, Julia's voice finally cracked through the tension. "James, please," she whispered, looking at me, her face desperate. "Let's talk about this privately." I leaned in slightly, my voice low but sharp. "You had plenty of chances to be honest with me in private. Now we do it my way." She looked around, searching for an ally. But there were none. Her friends sat stiff and silent. No one was coming to her rescue. Her parents, seated near the head of the table, were staring at the evidence. Her father looked like he wanted to murder someone. Her mother just looked ashamed. I stood there, waiting. The pen in front of her gleamed under the restaurant's soft lights. All she had to do was sign. She reached for it, her fingers shaky, then stopped. "Wait," she whispered, her eyes pleading. "We can fix this." I stared at her for a long moment, letting her words sink in. "Fix this?" I let out a slow breath, then leaned down just enough for only her to hear. "Julia," I murmured, my voice cold, "this is already over. The only choice you have left is how much worse you want it to get." Her breath hitched. Then, finally, she signed. The moment the pen left the paper, a weight lifted from my chest. 5 years of love, trust, and devotion, reduced to ink on a page. I picked up the papers, folded them neatly, and placed them in my pocket. Then, I turned to the guests. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said smoothly. "Dinner's on her." And with that, I walked away. I stepped out of the restaurant and into the cold night air. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Behind me, the muffled chaos of Julia's unraveling life carried on, the frantic whispers, the hushed accusations, the weight of a woman watching her carefully constructed world collapse in real time. But I was done listening, done caring. I loosened my tie, exhaling slowly. It was over. The doors swung open behind me. I half expected Julia to come running after me, but it wasn't her. It was Ryan. He looked just as drained as I felt, but his eyes held something else, gratitude. "She's in there crying," he muttered, rubbing a hand down his face, trying to explain herself to Natalie. "But I don't think there's anything left to say." "No," I agreed. "There isn't." A beat of silence passed between us. The irony of it all, the two men she had played now standing side by side, watching her life burn, wasn't lost on me. Ryan let out a bitter chuckle. "You know the worst part? I actually thought she might be the one." I gave him a sideways glance. "Yeah, I know the feeling." We stood there for a moment, both of us staring at the streetlights, as if trying to process how we had ended up here. Finally, Ryan shook his head. "I need a drink." I smirked. "I need a new life." He laughed, the sound dry and humorless. "You and me both." Then, without another word, he walked off into the night. And I walked away too. Away from the lies. Away from the pain. Away from the woman I once thought I knew. The apartment was too quiet. For 5 years, this place had been ours. The scent of Julia's perfume still lingered in the air. Her coat was still hanging by the door. Her favorite mug was still sitting on the counter. But she was gone. And now, this place belonged to me. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the pieces of a life that no longer existed. The silence should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt hollow. I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet and poured myself a drink. One glass, then another. I wasn't sad. Not exactly. I was just numb. Everything had unraveled so fast. One moment, I was a husband, a man with a future I thought was certain. The next, I was standing in the wreckage of a marriage that had been a lie. I picked up my phone. Dozens of messages. Friends. Family. Even Julia. I ignored them all. Then, almost without thinking, I opened my photos. Picture after picture of us. Vacations. Birthdays. Mornings in bed. 1,000 little moments that had meant everything to me. I should delete them. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled mindlessly, my thumb moving over the screen until I landed on a picture I had forgotten existed. Our wedding day. Julia was laughing, her head thrown back, pure joy in her eyes. And I was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world. I let out a slow breath and locked my phone. That man in the photo? He didn't exist anymore. I downed the rest of my whiskey and sat back, staring at the ceiling. This was it. The first night of freedom. Then why did it feel so empty? They don't tell you about the little things. How her scent still clings to the sheets. How you reach for someone in the middle of the night, only to find cold, empty space. How the silence in the apartment feels like a presence all on its own. Julia was gone, but her ghost was everywhere. I woke up late, my head pounding from the whiskey. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, cutting across the empty side of the bed like a cruel reminder. For 5 years, I had woken up to the sound of her breathing, the warmth of her body curled next to mine. Now, nothing. I got up, moving on autopilot. Shower. Coffee. Try to act normal. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Julia. James, please. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, my grip tightening. Talk. Now she wanted to talk? I should have ignored it. I should have blocked her. Instead, I typed 2 words. Too late. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of something new. Relief. I put my phone down, took a slow sip of coffee, and looked around. The ghost of her was still here. But not for long. I was done living with ghosts. I started with the photos. One by one, I scrolled through my phone, deleting them. The vacation in Italy. Gone. Our first apartment. Gone. That stupid selfie she took in my hoodie, grinning like she loved me. Gone. At first, my hand hesitated. But with every swipe, every erased memory, it got easier. Next came the apartment. I ripped the sheets off the bed, stuffed them into a trash bag. Her mug? Smashed it. The picture frames? Emptied them. Shoved the photos into a drawer I wouldn't open again. It wasn't just about getting rid of her things. It was about taking back the space. Making it mine. Then, as I was clearing out the bathroom, I found it. Her wedding ring. She must have taken it off before heading to the motel that night. Left it sitting there on the sink, like it meant nothing. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling the weight of everything it once symbolized. Then, without hesitation, I dropped it down the drain. I didn't need to hear it clink against the pipes to know it was gone. For the first time in 5 years, so was she. It had been 3 months. 3 months since the birthday dinner. Since the divorce papers. Since I erased Julia from my life. Or at least, I thought I had. I was at a cafe downtown, sipping my coffee, flipping through a book I wasn't actually reading, when I heard her voice. Soft. Familiar. Too familiar. I looked up. Julia stood at the counter, ordering her drink like she didn't have a care in the world. For a second, I couldn't breathe. She looked different. Not bad. Just emptier. Her hair was tied back in a lazy bun, her face free of makeup. She wasn't glowing like she used to. She wasn't happy. Then, as if sensing my stare, she turned. Our eyes met, and for the first time since the betrayal, I saw something real in her expression. Not confidence. Not guilt. Regret. She took a hesitant step forward. James. I let the silence stretch between us. There was a time when I would have given anything to hear my name on her lips. Now, it meant nothing. I picked up my coffee, gave her the smallest nod, and walked right past her. I didn't look back. She wasn't worth it. The past no longer had a hold on me. Walking past Julia in that cafe, feeling nothing but indifference, was the moment I knew I was free. Not just from her. From the doubt. From the pain. From the version of myself that had begged to be enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I moved to a new apartment. Got rid of every last trace of her. Started over. And then, one evening, as I sat at a bar, alone, but not lonely, someone new walked in. She didn't look like Julia. Didn't sound like her. And when she smiled at me, it wasn't calculated. It was real. She slid onto the stool next to mine, ordering a whiskey neat. I smirked. Good taste. She turned, met my gaze with curiosity. You think so? I raised my glass. Absolutely. She clinked hers against mine. Then I guess we're off to a good start. And just like that, it was. Not a rebound. Not a distraction. Just possibility. I didn't know where it would lead. But for the first time in a long time, I was ready to find out. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.